I honestly believe if you're doing your job, you do everything right, somebody's still going to complain about it. And if you know what the process is, it's a little easier to go through it. But I think sometimes investigators and departments can forget that there's a human being behind that process, and it can really leave an impact, you know?
Welcome back to the IA Police Podcast here with your host, Marlon Marrache. Today, another special guest. Look, all guests are special. I think we've kind of determined that. However, we do have Savage Training in the house. We're going to get to know Dan a little bit better. But before we get talking about law enforcement-related stuff, internal affairs, and all that good stuff, right off the bat, man, I have to ask you, you were you wanted to be a teacher. Did I get that right? At some point, you were gonna get your teaching credentials, and what happened, man?
Well, that was the plan. I was just out of high school, going to community college because I couldn't afford to go, so I was gonna get my general ed, go to a 4-year, and I was working with a junior high and high school surf team, part of the Christian Surfers United States. And
okay, shout out to Christian Surfers.
Yeah, and we
are they still alive? Do we know?
Yes, they are still alive.
Okay.
They're not as big a presence as they used to do contest circuits all up and down the coast. But anyways, so we got tied into Aptos High School there up in the Santa Cruz area, and we were taking high schoolers and junior hires on surf trips. And one of the moms just one day said, you know, you got a pretty good disposition. And I'm like, you don't know me well enough. But then she said, you know, my brother works at the Santa Cruz PD and you'd be a good cop. And my oldest brother, shout out to my brother Greg, he's 6 years older than me. He was a cop in my hometown when I was still in high school.
Okay.
May or may not have gotten me out of a few tickets. I'm just saying, when I was in high school, it's nice to have a brother in there when you're learning to drive. But anyways, so I thought about it. He had a good career, and I was just going to community college, and I said, you know, I might as well test.
And then, of course, the rest is history, like they say.
Something happened. I don't know. Bad decision on somebody.
If I may ask you, did you, having to reflect on that time as we're having this conversation, what is it that you would have liked to have taught? What grade level, or what is it that you?
I'm kind of a history nerd.
Okay.
So I was thinking history or of some sort. That would have probably been, if I went to a 4-year college at that time, probably what I would have majored in, and then got my teaching credential. That's probably the route I would have went.
Okay. And then surfing.
Started surfing when I was like 14.
Yeah, you know, not many people know this, but the IA guy used to surf a lot. I started paddling at 17. So I got a couple of questions regarding surfing.
Oh, here we go.
Well, for one of the most landmark beaches, if you will, or in the pro circle was Steamer Lane. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it's true. Back in the day.
And were you there when Tommy Curran competed there?
Yes.
I think he won there or something.
Yeah, back when they used to have the Coldwater Classic.
Yeah,
at
the
Steamers Lake Coldwater Classic back in the day. Yeah,
and people don't know how cold it really is, do they?
It gets cold, yeah. Problem was, every time they had the Coldwater Classic at the big Steamers Lane, it was like waist high. So
yeah, you know what? You bring up a good point, bro, because don't you think that, imagine us now, today, teenagers. Dude, we would go out and we can actually paddle out when there's a swell. Like, we wouldn't have to guess whether there's going to be waves or not. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Another question I got for you before we move on. Let us know your dream session. Where and with who?
Okay, so back in the day when I was naive, I would have loved to have like surfed Pipeline or Sunset with Tom Curran. Back in the, thinking that, why I say back in the day, because I have no business surfing Pipeline or Sunset with my skills. I mean, I've been surfing a long time, but I've learned that fast, hollow waves are not my forte. That proved it 2 summers ago in Nicaragua. I got I got pretty beat up, but yeah.
Okay.
So, but back in the day, that would have been my session. I'll tell you today, if I could do anything, I have a good friend, Brett. He's a ex-Navy SEAL. He broke his back up back in the day on a parachute accident, but I've been on surf trips with him, and he recently had a pretty significant re-injury of his back, and he can no longer surf. So if I could paddle out anywhere, I'd love to do a boat trip in the Minnetonka's with him.
Yes.
With my buddy Brett paddling out. That's
awesome.
That would be the most amazing time.
Yeah. Shout out to my best of friends, Rick and Quincy, who Quincy was very influential for me to learn how to paddle. I used to boogie board in Zuma Beach here locally, and next thing you know, I got a board and I fell in love with it. And I learned in County Line, of course, Topanga and Malibu was my home of surfing. I got to tell you, bro, there was a time, I want to say, since I dropped out of high school, because that's what happened. I ended up getting my GED and my high school diploma before I joined the Navy. But from the ages of 17 to about 24, bro, I was surfing every single day. And those were the best of times.
You know, people ask me all the time, why am I still in California?
Yeah.
I can't give it up, man. I surfed yesterday. I can't give it up. I can't get away from the ocean.
You know what? I'm going to add on to that because I'm only 20, maybe 23 minutes away from the beach from my house. And it's not many states where you can actually just get up and go to the beach and paddle out, man.
That's it. Watch the sunset on the beach. I will say one thing before we move on.
Yeah.
First surf trip I took as a young kid, I think I maybe was 17. The first actual real, like me and a buddy drive out, was actually down to Malibu. I know that's not, I mean, but from Santa Cruz.
Right.
But it was like one of the first years in forever. It was over Christmas break. I was a 17-year-old senior in high school. Wanted to go to Mexico. Dad wouldn't let us, but so we stopped. We went to Malibu. It snowed on the beach. That thing. So we were at County Line. At County Line. Freezing our tukuses off.
Oh,
yeah, it almost got jammed up by the LASO because somebody, not us, somebody lit a garbage can and had a fire going. So when you in between sessions, you know, you could thaw out.
You're like, these guys, what the hell they're doing?
And some cop goes, I suppose you boys didn't light that. We're like, no, sir. We didn't light it, but may have fed it. But yeah.
Wow.
So funny story. I know County Line and Zuma well.
Yeah. Dan, let me ask you this. Knowing that you wanted to teach, and I'm, you know, it's all going to come full circle. We'll talk about that later. And knowing you had this experience of this passion with surfing, did any of those hobbies or somewhat of a profession, if you will, help you out when you got involved in law enforcement? What do you think?
I don't know if surfing helped me out other than, you know, back in the day, it was pretty territorial in the area. So if you didn't just paddle out to a lineup, and so you had to learn the gift of gab. And I think the biggest attributes I had that would help me with this job were how my parents raised me. And then, you know, I think a lot of people started working, got the waiver, started working at 15 and a half.
There you go.
You know, and I think just building some of those skill sets, because I got hired as a cop, believe it or not, as a reserve police officer. Because when I was going to community college, I saw what my brother was doing. I was thinking, all right, maybe that's something I want to do. And I got hired as a reserve officer at 20 and a half, which is, I had no business. I mean, real I look back at photos when I first started, and then I did that for about 6 months, and then they actually sent me to the academy. So
At 21?
I was 21, right at 21, I got hired. Yeah. So, I mean, it worked out for my retirement because I didn't, by the time I hit 50,
of course.
I was pretty much maxed out. But yeah. But I do think some of, moved out of my house, had a great relationship with my parents, but moved out fairly early grew up in Gilroy, but moved to the Santa Cruz area just to surf. And so kind of lived on my own. So, yeah, I think those skill sets kind of help. That life experience, what little bit of it was, kind of helped me.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I of course, you know, the mind's gone right now and thinking about surfing. I think that here you are paddling, right? And you don't want to snake anybody, right? And someone's got to have the right of way. It's like the unwritten rule. I suppose, you know what? When you're out there in patrol and you got that radio call, you don't just want to snake someone and take their call, right? So that's what I was thinking, like, you know, maybe there is, you know, some somewhat of a connection as far as culture, as far as respect, right? That's where, true. You know, you don't want to, You know how it was back in the days when you surf. The last thing you want to do is drop in on someone and then be called a snake.
That's right.
And then they're
Or
coming
worse,
after you.
drop in on them and then flub the wave and get in their way. And then you're just like, oh, I'm just going to go in.
Yeah, poaching is what we call in law enforcement.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Thank you for sharing all that. I really appreciate you kind of getting into a little bit of your journey. So you came on in 1991.
That's correct.
Right? Of course, I don't get many guests that have come on the job that early. So, of course, my next question to you is, would you agree with me that one of the landmark cases was the Rodney King incident?
Definitely super influential in my career because I remember how impactful it was. One, it was making such national news, which you hadn't seen as much. And then I remember going through the academy and being told straight up, gone is the day that we hit anybody. That's what I was told by one of our DT instructors. Like, it just looks too bad on camera. And
we're
it
not
did.
going to do that.
We're not going to do that. And it impacted me because then you get in a
use of force.
Your first use of force, and you're like, I can't hit him. What do I do? Like, it's
the instructor told me I can't do that.
Don't hit him. But you're like, it seems like I got to do something because what I'm doing is not working right here. So it was interesting. It was just an interesting. I will say, not that I was anxious to hit people all the time, but there are times when people's trying to hurt you, and you got to take them into custody. You've got to use some force. But I do think. I'm not blaming that case, but I think some of the instruction I got immediately afterwards kind of created some hesitation in myself to take action when I think it would have been appropriate to take action.
Yeah, and spot on with that because we're going to talk a bit later about what you do now and how we can both agree that when you do effect an arrest, it doesn't always look like it's supposed to or like though you were taught. So we'll have that conversation. Take me to the day when the verdict came out. So here you are, I want to say it's like 4 or 5 p.m. In 1992, and all of a sudden the 4 officers were found not guilty. I think they were acquitted. They were acquitted, and one was the Sergeant Kuhn, and then the other 3. Where were you and what happened that day?
So I was actually working swing shift that day. I believe we had 6 months rotations. It was my first full 6-month tour completely on my own. So that previous, I'd been through FTO, graduated, and then spent like 3 months on day shift, I think. So now I'm on swing shift. And I remember it was around 1 a.m. I'll never forget it. I'm a young officer. The verdict had gone out. Some stuff had started kicking off in LA, and then being a university town with some protest environment. All of a sudden, like a crowd of about 400, which isn't as big as LA, but about 400. There was, I think probably at that time, maybe 6 of us on duty total. And this crowd starts coming down this main street.
And you've never seen 400 people?
No. And it didn't, the little stomp and drag at the academy didn't seem like it was going to work that night with just 6 of us. So I remember here I am, a young cop, trying to tell my very seasoned, one of the most senior sergeants, who I loved. He was a great sergeant, but calling him up on the radio and going, "Hey, Sarge, I think we should call some help because I don't think we're going to be able to manage this." And it kind of escalated or went very bad. It just continued to go downhill. Eventually, I'll never forget this story. This is kind of funny. But my sergeant, they're coming down this other hill. They had already, one of our officers, they knew where he lived, and they wound up breaking the windows out of his house. So we're trying to deal with that, but there wasn't enough of us to stop it. And then they start moving. Well, they're coming down this hill, and I remember the sergeant says, "Hey, describe the crowd demeanor." And right at that time, a glass bottle flew right past my head, and then it's just like rocks and bottles. And I'm like, "Sarge, they're trying to hit us with things." So long story short, they marched down to the PD. They actually completely surrounded our PD. And then somebody there was under the police sign, a wooden pillar. They lit that on fire. And we were told very bravely to abandon the building. Even though we had some dispatchers working inside. So that was like,
You're like, what about them?
Yeah, what about them? What do we do? And he says, well, if it gets bad, we'll go back in and get them. And then thankfully, the crowd, after the fire kind of went out, they fizzled and continued to protest. So it wasn't that bad. But that was, I'll never forget where the verdict was. Yeah, because
that was a long night.
That was a long night, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And so here you are, you continue your career. And at some point, you have to have known about internal affairs, right? I mean, we are an internal affairs podcast.
It's true.
You do know me from teaching internal affairs.
That's right.
We have that in common. And so I guess one of the first questions I have for you is, what was your impression back then about internal affairs compared to what it is today, right? You retired 5 years ago. And so even 5 years ago. So in other words, has that impression changed? And if so, how?
Well, I think definitely throughout my career, the impression has changed because we'll talk later, but I'm sure at the end of my career, I became the guy that was doing the findings, right? Yes. So I went from, interesting fact. So going back to my academy, we had an academy instructor that taught us, on morals and ethics, and that's all right. But he said, and I don't know if I believe him, but he said that he had never been IA'd and that our goal should never be. So when I first started, it always seemed like there was it was a bad thing. Like you were failing at something if you got IA'd. Right. Which now I realize, no, if you're doing your job, you're probably going to upset people and they're probably going to complain.
You're going to get IA'd.
You're going to get IA'd no matter what. Somebody violently assaults you as an officer, you defend yourself and somebody third party sees it, you may get an IA for doing your job correctly. And so I learned at first, it was very much like if I do anything wrong, or like, it's just going to be a gotcha thing, always gotcha. And I was kind of really nervous about the process. As I went through the ranks, I was just like, there's one level, but even as a sergeant, as a lieutenant, it was just like, all right, probably going to get a complaint filed against me, and just how can I articulate it?
I'm curious to know, why do we do that, you think? Why do we give it, well, let me back up. Would you agree that it's got a negative stigma attached to it?
Definitely.
Even back in 91.
Oh, definitely. Back in 91, definitely had a
right?
really negative
Same here,
stigma.
25, 26 years ago. What do you think that comes from? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that there was a lot of confusion. Not confusion. I don't think departments were very direct about the process. I don't think as a young officer, I was explained what was going to happen in the process. I knew that the only thing I knew is that if somebody filed a complaint and I got called in, I could get a representative.
Right.
I had no idea who this representative was. I don't know what funny, not knocking any unions, but we weren't even a police union when I first started. We were through operating engineers, like heavy equipment and other people. That was the union that represented us. Yeah. There was no, and so again, not knocking the lady that helped me with my first IA that I got. But again, I was like confident. It's like, well, I understand who you represent on these scales, but how often do you represent the cops? So I think there was a lot of stigma to when I first come on. I think it still exists in some departments today that if you getting IA'd about something means you did something wrong. And we also didn't understand that if somebody complains, the department has a duty to do a good, thorough investigation. That is the responsibility there has to be accountability. My opinion is that what we do is high stakes. There's high consequences. There's a lot of power entrusted in the police, and we have to be held accountable. But it shouldn't be such a negative stigma. I mean, I honestly believe if you're doing your job, you do everything right, somebody's still going to complain about it. And if you know what the process is, it's a little easier to go through it. But
yeah. To that point, Dan, let me ask you this. You think recruits today, like if you were to go back to Santa Cruz or just a medium, whatever department, and have a presenter or someone speak on behalf of the process of internal affairs, or better yet, how about someone that actually went through the whole process? You think that would have an impact on these young officers that are coming on to become cops?
I think I do. I think there are a couple agencies out there that I've heard of. Don't know for sure that kind of do that, but I don't think it's as a standard in our industry. I don't think that's happening. I don't think people are getting clarity of what that process is. And so it can be very disarming because, it's one of the few, like we're trained. I'll just use this example. We're trained like, hey, read them their Miranda rights, and if they don't want to, the suspect. I'm not even talking about outside of not read them. So we're as law enforcement, got to read their rights, and they have a right to not to talk, and that they have a right not to incriminate themselves. That's all great, our constitutional stuff that we deal with day in and day out. But then when you get IA'd, you're basically the subject, quote unquote suspect, right? And you have to talk. Like you don't get a choice. You know what I'm saying? Like if you've got to give that compelled administrative statement. And so I think it took me a long time to have an understanding, like this is part of the process. Yeah. And it was kind of outside the norm of the normal criminal investigation.
Yeah. You said it best. I think that we have this impression that if you get IA'd, that you did something wrong. Mm-hmm. When in reality, it's a checks and balance of the process by which someone decides that, hey, I think that Marlon and Dan on that radio call, they did something wrong. And so we shouldn't be so quick to say, oh, okay, well, let's screen it to see if it's actual alleged misconduct. And if it is, maybe we should let Marlon and Dan know that it's not that you did something wrong. It's just that someone probably could have a misunderstanding about what happened. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think there needs to be more of that communication. I also, it's, just as you were talking, I was thinking like throughout my entire career, the only the only investigations that I knew were serious is when somebody was immediately placed on admin leave. And the bulk of them, they're not. And even I think just having that knowledge, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like you're going through the process. Most, I think, administrators, right or wrong, you can see a complaint at different values right off the face. And I know I'm not saying judge the findings. I'm just talking like some complaints come in and you're like, okay, maybe we need, I'm thinking of like sexual harassment, sexual battery complaints. Those immediately, you're probably removing the person from service, and that those carry a lot of weight. Right. They could still be exonerated, but right off the bat, where there's other complaints we get. I think we were talking earlier. Yeah. We had lunch, great lunch, by the way.
Yeah, and we already had the whole episode, and I'm trying to repeat it.
But we were talking about like the first IA I had was for, I got accused of stealing like $100 off one of my arrests. And
money beef.
Total money beef. And I was devastated because I was like, one, never would do that, was, never a thief, not how I was raised. But then I'm like, what are the consequences? Like if I stole from somebody, I'm done. I was a young cop, like within my first year, and I'm like, I could be done, and I didn't do anything wrong. How do I disprove this before body cams? Supposedly it was between the time, it was conveniently the theft supposedly occurred between the time I removed from the car in the jail cell port to when I took him into the cell port, which is all recorded. But in that window was when so I really had nothing to say. It was, I mean, as far as I had no, other than my moral character to say that this did not happen. I didn't have any other evidence, but I was at the time worried about I could be fired, and nobody, hindsight, they never put me on admin leave. The allegation, I was exonerated from it, but the allegation at face value, obviously somebody saw it. Now I don't think an administrator could come and tell you, on face, but I think just knowing these big allegations, when somebody's removed from service, it may be a more long, hopefully it's not too long of a process, as for do a thorough investigation, but let's also not rake somebody over the coals through time and punishment, but I just wish somebody would have explained a little bit more of that process.
I'm going to pick that up from that point. How long did it take to adjudicate this one complaint?
Almost a year.
Okay.
Almost a year.
Having to reflect on that as we're having this conversation, do you feel as though maybe, perhaps, the punishment is the process?
I've seen a T-shirt somewhere that says that, and looking over, not just in my career, I don't think that at the time in my department it was a lieutenant that did IA. Then later it got bumped down to a sergeant, but I don't think that lieutenant was being vindictive. Right. I just think they were being thoughtless on the impact that this is having on a young officer. They're just going, I understand they're doing their day-to-day, but I think sometimes investigators and departments can forget that there's a human being behind that process, and it can really leave an impact. Just that process alone. And I've also, I could give you examples, unfortunately, from my own agency where that process was punitive, and in my opinion, it resulted in the loss of good officers who were exonerated from the complaint. Yeah. But the way the complaint process was held caused them to be, I have no trust for you. I have no trust for my administrators, and so I'm going to walk. I'm going to go somewhere where, I feel
can't be trusted.
I can be trusted, or I feel like, I have that trust. They truly,
or they have my back.
They have my back. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you might even, depending on the circumstances, is say something along the lines, no point intended, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. This is going to be okay. Not necessarily saying that I'm going to adjudicate this as unfounded or not sustained.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that, hey, we're going to be okay in this.
Yeah, I also wish. Look, I understand the beast of larger agencies. Santa Cruz, 100 sworn. So it's not a super large agency. Correct. It's not. It's not a super small. It's big enough that you got enough moving parts, but not so small that, But anyways, in that size agency, at least, I don't know how it would work in an LA because you just got sheer numbers, but I do think it could work because you have a number of when you were on the squad, you had a number of investigators. Could you just explain where we're at in the process to somebody? Just explain like, hey, we've done all the initial interviews. We are just following up on 2 other witness interviews, and we're moving forward. If even that, just so I know that it's not just. But sometimes I think like it's pure conjecture, but I do think in my case, I think the lieutenant. Knew that there was really nothing there to the investigation, did the initial statements, and then just sat on it.
Yeah.
But not realizing that sitting on it to a brand new cop is like...
It's got a huge impact.
Oh, is my career over? Like, am I going to get found guilty for something I didn't do?
Yeah.
And then they're going to go, oh, you're a thief, you're out.
Yeah. And money beefs is interesting because would you be surprised to tell you that that's not certainly the last time some type of allegation is going to happen? Because it happens to this very day. Luckily today we have body worn cameras where we can, so hey, as a lesson learned for you investigators, if you're investigating a money beef, you know what? Do the count on body worn.
Totally. Do everything.
Do everything on body worn. I had a case
100%.
like that. To your point, I think it makes it even worse when you know that you didn't do anything wrong and the department got it wrong. You were exonerated, but yet this whole process took forever. And sometimes the punishment seems to be the process. And all I wanted, me, accused employee, was just tell me where I'm at. I don't think anybody, not just in law enforcement profession, I think nobody likes to be kept in the dark or the unknown. And we are all accountable for that. It's not just the department or the sergeant. I think we're all in this together where we should try to make this better, which is probably one of several reasons why I decided to have this podcast. What do you think?
I think it's right. And I also think that, you even have people that may, I know you're reaching out to agencies that where some agencies where it's the supervisor, if you're a line field supervisor and one of your officers gets an IA, you're doing the whole investigation.
Yes.
That wasn't my model. We didn't have a big team, but it was like, if it was going to go to discipline, it went to our internal affairs investigator. So sometimes you got to wonder, it's like anything, you get in an OIS shooting, the investigation of your shooting may be as good as the investigator that interviews you. Yep. And so, again, everybody out there, you've got to be your best advocate. In your best, not your advocate, but you have to be an expert on these things. If you're a tactician, be good and know the why behind those. If you're dealing with use of force, know the law, know some case law, and don't be one of these people that pulls the random case laws to justify a thing. I'm talking about truly know what the boundaries are. Because you'll be better, because then if I have a better understanding of what the law is, then when somebody's investigating me, I am going to recognize what questions they didn't ask me that are pertinent or a pertinent negative. Well, you keep saying what he did or what I did. Let's talk about what we didn't do. Both the suspect, if the suspect just would have stopped, I would have had more time to de-escalate or whatever. If you know, I didn't do this because it would have put me at risk, and here's why, and being able to articulate that. So, but I think a lot of the investigators, and I think there's a lot of that don't understand the process. I can tell you this, not to bash my agency, but back in the day, prior to getting a different legal representation, my department for a while there, and this is in the 90s, was they were going beyond the 1 year investigation to met out, totally in violation of POBAR, but nobody knew. You know what I'm saying? Nobody knew. We just knew we didn't like the process as an officer. We're just like, why is it taking so long if you're going to do something? Then it's later, we got a better legal representative. Like, well, actually, they can't do that, period. They can't. We're like,
you're like,
wait,
what?
No, nobody told them. Like,
I didn't know either.
I didn't know either, but yeah, they should probably know because they're the ones doing the investigation.
Yeah, you might want to. It's only a $25,000 claim, 3304 statute of limitations.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that it almost prompts me to ask you this question. Dan, if I gave you the podium today, right now, even with your agency or any other agency, and there's a room full of sergeants that are getting ready to begin their tour to be in internal affairs as investigator, what's the one thing you want them to know about that job?
Well, as I said earlier, just know that there's a human behind the complaint. So be thorough, but be fair. Don't get stuck in trying to prove one thing. Always ask yourself, you know, but what if they didn't do that, or what's missing? And ask those questions too. You know, don't just try to prove the policy violation. Look at it holistically, just like you would want if I was in that seat, I would want somebody to look at all sides, which is appropriate. You know, you kind of framed it, if I can change the question just a little bit, you kind of framed it as like an IA investigator. I think any new supervisor has to understand POBAR. They have to understand the things you should and shouldn't do right off the bat, because they could totally set up an officer in a negative way. They could also set up the investigation in a negative, where you start getting compelled statements outside of POBAR, and now you're tainting. It could be a legitimate. Cops do dumb things. Cops do illegal things.
I agree.
And I think IA needs to be there to help weed those people out. We don't want them in our industry. But yet, if I don't have an understanding of that, I could take something in the initial process and start ruining the investigation from the front that allows somebody that say they are bad, and now I've tainted the investigation. Yeah. So you've got to have a better understanding of when you should be doing things and when you shouldn't be.
We're going to get into you teaching and the stuff that you do for Savage Training Group, but let me ask you this. I mean, you've been doing this for quite some time, up and down, not just here in the state of California. You've been going across the nation. Do you think it requires a skill set to be an IA investigator?
I do. I think it, you know, because it's not, a lot of us, you know, if you were ever I was a detective for 2 years. Okay. I was more, I'll just be honest with you. I loved being out in the field. I was more of for lack of a better word, tactical guy. That's what I really, most of my career was trying to get infused in jobs that had me out in the field and doing stuff like that.
Until you promoted.
Till I promoted, but even when I tried to hold on to it as long as I could, and then I realized, nobody wants me out there. So when you get to a certain level, it's like, they don't want me there. But I think there is a skill set, because when you're a detective, you know, you are trying to, I think, prove the merits of a case on a suspect that you've arrested. And yes, we want to seek justice and get all the sides, but it is, you know, we're looking at evidence and then trying to tie that evidence to the individual. And I think with an IA, yes, we still need to do that, but we also have to look at, unlike a homicide detective, I've got to look at department policy. I've got to look at our city policies, all those. And so those are just different avenues that I have to have a better understanding of. Yeah. And then also, you know, like in my case, the alleged theft of this money, my first IA I had, you know, there was no evidence supporting my statement. So I think you're going to have to go deeper, and there was no evidence supporting that I did the crime. Right. So I think you're going to have a real skill set of like just gathering those facts. But hey, if you think I did the crime, gather all those facts as well. If you don't think I did the crime, then gather all those facts, and just let obviously the final arbitrator or something like that kind of weigh into it. But
no stone goes unturned.
It shouldn't.
Yeah, that's normally the motto. I was going to ask you also, at some point you promoted. So you did what, 30 years?
According to the state of California and my PERS pension, it's 29.78. But who's counting? There's a story why I didn't do my full 30, but it's probably come later. But
are we talking like $1 or $2 a month of a difference?
I think I lost $30. I think
$30.
That's what I was told when I
probably
decided to.
It was probably worth
at the
$30.
time. Yes, at the time it was definitely for my sanity and my own physical health. It was time to go. But over those 30 years, I just look at the different experiences I had. Oh, so the question you really asked me is like my different experience. I did just shy of 30 years. I was a sergeant. I was a line level officer, did detectives, did a couple of assignments for about 10 years, was a sergeant for about 13. As I say in my classes, not giving it away, but I love being a sergeant. I really did.
Yes.
I had a pretty significant back injury at one point, and I was afraid I was going to medical out. This is not the right reason to promote to lieutenant, but for me, I realized like it is a less physically demanding job than running out there in the field. So I promoted lieutenant, did that job. Our next step was deputy chief operations. I actually thought a friend of mine was going to be the chief. He encouraged me I had to finish my degree. I didn't have my 4-year degree. And so I thought, hey, man, why not? The lieutenant gig wasn't the best. And so that's where I finished up as a deputy chief of operations. So
let me ask you this in terms of the lens of an adjudicator, because you did a great job explaining to her from an investigative lens. What is that lens like?
I think it's twofold. I've had to adjudicate a few cases for disciplinary action against officers. And, realistically, I had to look at, one, was the investigation thorough? Just on base facts, was there a stone unturned? Was there a witness that we talked to but we didn't go in depth with that we need a second go? So part of it is just, my feeling is this a thorough investigation? Do I have any questions? Yeah, but this person said that, and we made no attempt to corroborate it anyways. That needs to be done. And so there's a couple times, probably one of the investigators that worked under me probably was a little upset a couple times, like, hey, go back, nice try, but finish this up. And then the other real lens is, looking at each potential allegation, because typically what we're looking at is there a violation of the law. I mean, that would be a referral to the DA's office, but then also what are the policies that this person potentially has exposure to or not? What are those allegations that could raise their head in this investigation? And then is there evidence to support that they did not violate it or they did? And I think you've got to document both.
Yes.
You have to document both. You can't just list, hey, here's our sustained and here's the ones we're going to ignore. These may have been policy that initially came up in the interview process or something like that, but sometimes we don't address those. So I think a good post for the adjudicator, because the real, I did say sustained or not sustained or exonerated. I put that stamp on it, and then the chief got, in our agency, the chief got to do the skelly. That was the next level. He had the officer skelly. So I wanted to make sure that if I brought it to the chief, it was as thorough as possible. Now, here's where the flaw is, though. Marlon, no offense. We were given a list. I think there were at the time there were 15 supervisors, and there was that's not right. Whatever. There was 13 jobs we could do in our department as a supervisor.
There's numerous jobs.
But I'm saying I think at the time there was this list of 13, and one of the DCs had asked rank from 1 to 13 your top favorite to your least favorite.
Okay.
And no offense, I'm going somewhere. No offense, I ranked IA 20th. I did not want to go to IA. Like I said, I love being out in the field. That's where all my training, all my bread and butter was. But what's funny, the reason I bring that up is then suddenly when I first promoted, I had to do a couple IAs that resulted in written reprimand as a lieutenant. Mm-hmm. But prior to that, I had 0 IA experience. And now when I promoted a deputy chief, the first assignment for about the first year and a half was up in admin. So that's when I was now oversaw IA.
Yeah, you're the IA guy.
I'm the IA guy. I'm doing these adjudications, and I've been like, not trying to credit myself, but I was like, hey, I got to go to some training here. Like I didn't do this. I get the base. I did understand POBAR. I did, as a supervisor, I felt it was important to know those boundaries and all those in the requirements.
You were challenged.
But I was challenged. Because I had to learn a process when I was and I do think and it's not just in IA, but I do think across our industry that happens a lot, through our career path, through no fault of our own. We don't have exposure to one given side. And then all of a sudden you promote to a position, and they're like, congratulations, you're in charge of it. You're like,
Yeah, and just for the record, no one likes to go to IA. You're not the only one. I've had 150 plus guests, and I haven't gotten around to that question, but I kind of read between the lines. Even me, I've been asked when I appear as a guest in podcasts.
Yeah.
They ask me, hey, which is an interesting question. They ask me, hey, why did you go to IA? And when I teach, the same thing, right? And the answers, the normal answers that I get, or I should say the average answer is, because I was voluntold.
Yeah.
One. Yeah. Two, some actually say it's a feather in the cap to promote.
Yeah. I was going to say that
is
some of the big motivators, the people that wanted to go, I think that
100%.
that was
big agency like LAPD, I can tell you it's a Sergeant 2
definitely.
spot, which is a rocker. And rockers, Sergeant 2 spots are very hard to come by. So where do you look? You go to internal affairs. Now, granted, flexible hours, weekends off, good for the family. So there's other factors. Even when I didn't really think it was going to be such an emotional roller coaster, because this. I mean, I prosecuted cops and I defended cops both, and this as an adjudicator. The decision you're about to make is going to have such an impact on one of your officers. And for a small agency, and when you were talking about the size of our agency, hey man, the janitor even knows.
Right.
About your IA. What do you think?
Everything's secret, though. What are you talking about?
Yeah, everything is very hush.
Nobody talks in the halls. No, I mean that was honestly when I was reviewing. I think the first one I did as an adjudicated it. I was really looking at like that. Not only the whole process. Let's make sure the integrity of the investigation's right, but also I realized like my decision doesn't just impact this officer. It may impact depending on the allegation, his family, you know what I'm saying? Because now why is daddy home when, how do you explain that? Yeah. That's one thing. But then I know that decision is going to impact others because people are going to know and there's always going to be a little bit of us and them via the admin. And I wasn't worried about that, but I'm like, my decision could impact others. I wasn't worried about positive other than if we did a good thorough, I wanted people to know like, hey, we're going to adhere to the process and do a thorough investigation, and we're going to clear people when they need to be cleared. Yeah. Like know that going in, but we're also going to hold people accountable. And there's that fine line of it's not a fine line. I think there is a line that you have to hold people accountable. And so I knew in all my investigations that it wasn't just about the person that's going through the IA. They are totally impacted, but it also has a ripple effect. I mean, we were talking earlier, one of the cases I know, you say the punishment is the process, 100% in that IA, I believe we lost a total of 6 officers that were all exonerated, but the whole reason they left is because of how the department conducted that process for that IA. And it just left such a bad taste in everybody's mouth, and it violated trust where they didn't feel like, now I've got a target on my back, and I may have been exonerated, but what's the next? Is it just going to be repetitive? Yeah. And
if I may ask you, did the department learn from that particular situation?
Sadly, and I think this is a valuable lesson for everybody. Sometimes it takes a change of leadership before true change happens. Sometimes I'd encourage, I'm not minimizing anybody's challenges that they're going through, but sometimes you have to outlive people. And I think in a bigger agency, not saying it's easy, you have more ability to move away from certain people.
Correct.
In a smaller agency, you don't have that. You're stuck with them.
You don't have that luxury.
And sometimes you just have to play the long game and be like, I'm going to outlive them here. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
And it'll change. And I think our department really, got better out of the process after there was some change of leadership.
Yeah, no, absolutely. have a friend of mine from another agency, probably the same size as Santa Cruz, where there's a new chief, and they're just so happy to know that not everything is an IA. Where the prior chief, they were just doing IAs on everything. So, the change of leadership is a very good starting point to be able to kind of alleviate the impact it has, like you said, not just on the officer, but the entire department, the rank and file. So
can I add another point though?
please.
I think it goes to that impact that an IA has. Like, if you're involved in a shooting, you're going on admin leave. It's just part of the process. Correct. You're going to go on admin leave. You got to get criminally cleared. But part of that process is, whether it's an OIS or anything, or whether someone's on admin leave, or I even would lump in a little outside of the bounds of IA, but workman's comp, extended workman's comp, no fault of their own. We get injured in this job. But people don't call people when they're on leave, and especially the bosses. And I know it's like, well, you can't risk. They have the sanctity in the investigation. Listen, again, remember there's a human on the other side, and so just calling. And I'll be clear. I'm not trying to say I did anything right, but one of the things I know I did right, and I wish I would have done it earlier, is after one of our last shootings at our departments, I had 4 officers on leave, and I was in charge of IA at the time, so I wasn't overseeing that. And I remember, actually, I wasn't during the initial investigation. I got promoted towards the tail end of it, but these people were still on admin leave, and I remember just calling them. That's like, I guess some people can say that's a gamble. What if they say a statement that could be part? But you know what? They've been sitting on rocks. They've been sitting out by themselves, just wondering what's going to happen with this. And there was a little public outroar on ours, a little community questioning, which is appropriate, but it gets a little volatile sometimes. And so they got all that. They read the newspaper. They see the news.
That's even worse.
It's even worse. And so later, after I called them all and just checked in, look, you got to understand, there's still this investigation's going on. You haven't been cleared yet, so I don't want to talk anything about what happened. This call is about how are you doing? Yeah. Is there anything I can do? And I learned that from somebody far smarter than me, but it was one of the first times I kind of took that leap to go out there and do it. And sadly, and again, I'm not here to pat myself on the back. I kind of wish I would have done it earlier in my career, but later, all 4 of those officers said, man, you're the only person of rank that called us at all. We were just like I liken it to you like you're a leper. All of a sudden something happens and you're just like unclean, go off in the corner and be by yourself. But I think we can do a better job than that. Take the risk, have these difficult conversations with people. And, that may save them. They still may not like the process, but at least they have a little bit of understanding and say, hey, at least they care for me.
Yeah.
They value us.
Very, very well said. It kind of reminds me of, I remember watching a Steven Seagal movie way back then, and he was out there getting ready to make his last kill. And on the mirror, he wrote, the anticipation of death is worse than death itself. And that sticks to me all the time when you talk about this process where, man, I don't know what's going to happen, man. And that in it itself is like the punishment.
Right.
And what makes it even worse is you're exonerated, bro. Hey, we got it wrong.
Right.
My bad. Sorry. We didn't call you for a whole year. And to your point, we can just do better.
Mm-hmm. I think it's part of that process. I especially looking at like the OIS investigations or something like that, where when those are done wrong, those impact so many people. Yeah. And so many times, some agencies, obviously LAPD, not saying just the sheer volume of calls you have them a lot more frequently. For smaller agencies, they don't happen that often. Some agencies, hardly ever. Yeah. My agency, it seemed, I don't know, I don't want to misspeak, but like 3 to 5 years, we'd have something. But it's not frequent enough that you get that good, or by then you've had somebody that's done one investigation, but now you've got that change. Usually our IA was a 3 to 5, and so now you've got a new investigator in there, and you got new DIA investigators who, God bless what they're doing too, but it's a new event. So that sometimes we forget, that kind of, if we did a process correctly, can we replicate that the next time? And I think when there's that low frequency but very high risk critical event, that's where some problems can happen. And I can see some of our investigations that we did. That I think that whole process, the no calling. We had one case I was telling you about where they hand delivered the IA notification at people's home on their day off. We'd never done that, but like, why? And this wasn't even, and this wasn't even an admin leave case. So it's like, why would you make an officer feel like it's so serious that you're going to there? So just violating little things like that of the process can really have an impact, you know, a long-term impact.
Yeah, no, totally, 100%, man. Okay, the one question I don't like to ask, but I do like to ask, of course, I sound very contradicting, but worst incident in your career?
Man, I can't really answer that question without giving homage to a couple. I think there's, if you go through this career long enough, you're going to have impacts that calls that impact and leave a mark. Mm-hmm. Some of them you don't even know about. Subconscious is amazing. But I'll give, I remember I was a young sergeant. There was a family that was coming from actually this big religious revival on our boardwalk, and they got hit by a DUI driver. I was one of the first on scene, and I was a brand new father, and the two little girls in the back seat I could tell were killed instantly. And that one just, because I remember, and then the parents were, and they are still alive, and they went to my church at the time. Their accident was so horrific that I didn't recognize the family. And then later when I learned how it was, so I had an emotional attachment to that one just because I was a young father and just thinking like, hey, what happens to these parents when they wake up and they realize their family's gone? I couldn't imagine going through that. So one of the things we talk about in our critical incident response, like what I should have done, and I'm going a little long on this question, but what I should have done on that one is probably turn my back to the car accident because I had people working it. And I would have been a little more emotionally detached because it was a hit and run investigation. I had to go track the person down and all that, and actually got them in custody. They did do time for manslaughter, and so that was. I got to give a shout out to them because I think that was the first one that really left a deep mark in my heart and on my brain. And then in 2013, I lost my two friends, Butch and Beth. They were murdered in the line of duty, and that one left an impact. It was really. I mean, Beth was my direct report for about 3 years, and so it was really hard. And I love Butch too. No to his family. And then getting my department through. I don't say my department. I was a brand new lieutenant when that happened, and so me and another guy. Basically, we had 4 lieutenants right after that incident. 2 of them, I won't say why, weren't working for about a year, and so me and another guy were doing the job for a year, and it was really going through that harsh impact event and then kind of guiding a department through. It was drinking from a fire hose almost every day. It took a huge impact. But the one I got to really pinpoint on, the one that actually I had to go get professional care for was when Damon Gutzweiler was killed in June 6th of 2020. I rolled up on that event, and I just got to give it a little. That was right after George Floyd had happened, and that was right about when all the George Floyd riots were occurring. So you kind of got to remember, we went through COVID, where we were all heroes, right? Yeah. And everybody was like, go first responders, and then that happens, which was, I think that's a disgusting event, and I think cops should have done a better job on that scene, my opinion, on George Floyd. But that kicked off all these protests, and we had them in our city. We had a series of protests, and then we were getting ready for, I don't know, like our 6th protest on that Saturday when the call went out, and he was basically ambushed. When I got on scene, I really thought we had, based upon the intel that was coming out, we had 4 dead cops, a couple lieutenants. It was a sheriff's office event. I was a redheaded step chief, just showed up to help out. I was a deputy chief at the time. But really started, I had the honor of working with the lieutenants that were running it, who were doing a great job. I think I had a little bit easier role initially because I was detached, meaning I wasn't on the radio. So those guys that were handling it was a much more, but the sheer emotion of that event was so heavy. And I think with having been a hero to being called a racist cop, through that whole COVID to George Floyd transfer, having a series of protests. They surrounded our PD twice again, tried to light it on fire, vandalized it, and then getting ready for this event. And then just the emotions of trying to get like the initiative on the suspect. Initially, we thought we had two, and thinking that, man, it was just I won't go into a debrief of it, but we had zero radio communication of where they got ambushed physically, just because of a dead spot. Had no, so they'd go up a certain point and you couldn't communicate to anybody. And then just the heaviness of having already experienced fairly recently the loss of my two, and then thinking like, oh dear God, we just lost more. It really sent me into a, man, I don't might like to admit this, but I'll look in the camera and say it, like, you never know. Our buddy John, John Morris on, he says like, cops, we're all good until we're not. Yeah. Then we just kind of go off a cliff. That was my cliff moment. Yeah. So not to be heavy, though, I will say this. I got professional care after that. And I would just encourage anybody, if you're dealing with anger issues, you're drinking too much, you find that with your family you don't have much emotional elasticity, those are all signs that you're dealing with trauma. Mm-hmm. And I didn't recognize it because I always thought like, man, I get home, I compartmentalize my wife. I think, yeah. And I think like, okay, my kids, but I realize now, I think I would have been a better father. Just because my emotional bandwidth would have been different. I remember I was kind of born in like a school of hard knocks, Dad. Not life's gonna nick you down, like pick yourself up. But I realized that like when I was going through from the aftermaths of the events, my, like I said, that emotional elasticity. Like I would sometimes be thinking my kid would have a problem, and I'd be thinking in my head, literally sometimes like, this isn't a sucking chest wound, kid. Like shake it off. That's what the thought.
Yeah.
And I realized like I wasn't connecting, but it was a big deal to him. He's a young kid trying to turn into a young man, and I'm totally mitigating his, because I just didn't have so I got help, and my only regret is that I didn't get it sooner, because I think I would have processed that. But so I know you asked me for one event, I gave you three, but they all built up into, I think, that culmination of that summer of 2020 where Dan Filippo was in a very dark place.
And I thank you so much for sharing. I know sometimes it's difficult to be vulnerable, so to speak, and it's part of the profession. I think you and I were talking about that, where, if you're going to sign up to be in this profession, you're going to experience some dark moments in your life. So
absolutely,
I really appreciate that. Okay, let's get to the good stuff now, because here I am on LinkedIn, and I see this guy Scott Savage, and I see this Savage Training Group, and I thought it was a lion, but I think it's the lion and the horse, and it was roaring at me. Like, I got to get a hold of this guy. Right. So to make the long story short, we had a phone conversation, and he goes, hey, you know what? I'd like to meet you. I said, hey, I'll fly out to go meet you and tell you what I got, right? I'm got this internal affairs background, if you will. But what I really don't know is how to dish it all out, right? And so he goes, well, we're going to be over at Walnut Creek PD. Yep. You're more than welcome to come. And I said, yeah, I'll fly out there. Don't worry about it. And here I am. I show up, and I see Ginger over here.
Oh, there I am.
I'm like, look at this guy. And then I see Scott, and you guys are teaching away. And of course, I got to admit this, LAPD, big ego. We all have egos. I'm thinking, who are these guys? Where the hell do these guys work?
Who's this small town cop?
Yeah, exactly. Where do these guys work, right? And unbeknownst to me, it opened up my eyes to sit there and say, like when I was taking my flight home, I was just going, you know what? I did this for 24 years, and every time that I went to training, he's right. Yeah, it is check the box, and it is death by PowerPoint. I never really put those two phrases in a sense that, hey, this is what we really do in this industry, right? In other words, we're kind of cheating our officers from not really training. So I got to ask you, man. So how did this relationship start with Scott? And here we are, a Savage Training Group. Take it away.
completely blessed and humbled to be a part of this team. I mean, realistically, I joke, I'm just some redheaded step chief from what I consider a small agency. What do I have here to offer? But, actually I met Scott when I was the DC of admin, because we stole it from LAPD. You were one of the first, I think, that had written in your policy about disengagement on suicidal subjects. And so through some connections, my buddy Warren had reached out to somebody that he went to SLI with at LAPD, got the policy, and we put it into our policy, and then did a big rollout of basically walking away from suicidal subjects, and especially when they're in their own home. So Scott just called me, and he just wanted to have the policy, and so I was like, yeah, no problem, dude. We're about ready to put it online anyway. So here's the policy, and then he was telling me he had formed the company, I believe, in 2018. This was about 2019. So the company was fairly early on. And he just asked me a weird question. I'm so glad he asked it to me, because I could have just given the policy and we wouldn't be here today. Right. But he asked me, he goes, hey, I've heard your name, and not that I'm anything special, but when I was in the SWAT world, we did a lot of training over at, he was with Santa Clara at the time, and we did a lot of cross training with their team. They hosted some classes. So I kind of knew some people over there. And he goes, yeah, I've heard your name. He goes, what, now you're a DC, like a suit guy. Like, what do you miss the most? Yeah, I know. I used to be like a 2-finger pointer, and now I'm driving a desk, but anyways, now I'm dodging paper cuts. Yeah, totally. It's awesome. Anyways, it was good. A good experience. But he just asked me, what do you miss the most? And honestly, I wasn't looking for a job. I just said, I miss teaching, because through all my, I was a use of force instructor, firearms instructor, all those things. And I think that's what I originally wanted to do, right? I want to be a teacher. So I told him that, and he goes, that's an interesting question or answer. Meet me for lunch. And we met for lunch, and here I am.
The rest is history.
The rest is history. And I've just been, I've been completely humbled and honored to be a part of this process. And we are, I do think there are some great training companies out there and great trainers, but I do think we're hitting on something that's resonating, because all the company growth is by word of mouth. And I think the biggest focus, as we were just challenged, is what is the clarity? Not only are you conducting a good class, but is there something that you are giving the students that they could replicate 3 to 4 months down from the road? Don't have to look at their notes, and I'm not against checklists and notebooks, but did it leave such an impact? Did it stick enough in their head that they can take these concepts and use them tomorrow? Yeah. And I think we're zeroing in on that, and I know it. For the tactical classes that I teach, the patrol level tactics and our critical incident response, I know it works, because I'm humbled by it. I get texts from students all the time, like, hey, Flippo, it's just like we talked about in class. This is what happened. This is what I did. And this was the result. And I'm like, well, kudos for you taking on the leadership and helping drive the class, but also awesome. What we're teaching works.
I got 2 questions to ask you. Question number 1 is, it's 6 years in the making, because you started in 2019, right? What have you learned about yourself in this journey with Savage Training Group?
First off, I should have been a negotiator, because negotiators are good listeners. And even as an instructor, I'll tell you, man, I have to work on it. I have to, because, instructing, you're always, I'm not there to opine and give opinion and say that's good enough, but I do want to, to be honest with you, I've heard some horrible plans tactically. I've been in some classes, and I've been like, man, if you want to get in a shooting, that is a good plan. Like, just go do that, and you'll probably increase your odds that you're going to. So let's not do that, but I think where I have to learn to listen to what they're saying, and then develop the correct questioning that gets them on the right path. And so I've learned a lot. I've learned better how to listen. I wear my sleeves all over, my emotions all over my sleeves. So how do I have like a deadpan, like I'm not thinking like, oh dear God, please don't do that. Yeah. Don't let it be mistaken that I want to get them where they won't do that, but they're not going to have any understanding of why if I don't help them get there and make their own conclusion of why that's a bad plan. Right. And so learning how to listen, learning how to have a good Socratic questioning is something I've had to greatly learn.
The next question is going to come a little of a surprise to you by listening to your journey, your story. I know that you were an instructor while you were in Santa Cruz as an active officer, but do you think that maybe one of your motivating factors to teach has been these incidents that occurred?
Oh, absolutely.
And I paraphrase it by saying that perhaps it runs through your mind about the information that you didn't get. We could have done this. And I think you and I can agree, and I always say this, is that any type of critical incident or a use of force for that matter, we're always questioning is what is it that we could have done or what you didn't do as opposed to the things that you did. What do you think?
Well, all critical incidents always have, they don't go 100% right. It's just the nature of a fluid dynamic problem, and you're making quick decisions. Now, if we're better at those decisions, we tend to have better outcomes. If we know what the goal is and how we're going to get there and how we can appropriately coordinate the men and women getting there, you're going to get ahead of your problem. Why I am passionate about it. I've said this on the video. I don't want to make it heavy, but yeah, having over my career, 5 friends that I knew personally that were murdered in the line of duty, not from like murdered, not knocking car accident, but I'm just saying like by gunfire, and that leaves a mark on you, and I want to honor their legacy. I do not want to forget them ever. But I was listening to a podcast, and I wish, forgive me, whoever you are out there, he was a New York City cop that had retired, but he said this, and I wish I could remember his name. He said, part of the problem in law enforcement is we keep getting bit by the same rattlesnake, and we're not talking about it. I thought it was such a great analogy of being an outdoor guy. Like, you and I are walking on this trail, we see a snake, and we're like, what is that? We're trying to deal with it. So we do something, and all of a sudden, oh, dude, I got bit by it.
Yeah.
And then later we're like, oh, dude, you should have recognized what that was. Yeah. You shouldn't have done that. Well, now I don't want to talk about it, right? I don't want to talk about how I got bit because that might lead some embarrassment on me or my agency. And then what happens is the next group comes along and they get bit by the same thing. And so anything that I can do, again, I'm just great company, just one person, but anything that we can do collectively to try to, one of the things Scott says that the founder of the company all the time is like, I do believe in this in the critical incident class, the tactics, the leadership concepts, the decision-making, the sense-making that we're talking about in that class. I honestly I'm not trying to be pig-headed or bold statement, but I think we are creating the shooting that never occurred by being smarter about what we're doing. And please don't, it's not about running away. And I'm just talking about knowing when to stop, knowing when to push, knowing when is a time to appropriately get more intel. And before we make contact, let's ask the right questions so we have a better understanding. We're not going by we talk about the skill of sense making. Sense making is understanding what your problem is. And I always put this, and people are like, yeah, no crap, Flippo. Like, that's what we do, understand the problem of the call. Well, I'll just ask you this. Is any DV call the same call? Everyone, it goes out as a DV call, but everyone's got a different nuance.
Correct.
And some are more violent. Here's the best example. A guy with a knife. A guy with a knife in a busy intersection, that's one problem. Got containment issues, traffic issues, got like, what's the crime? But you put that same guy in the same intersection, but now he's on top of the Metro bus. Now I got other problems. Like, how am I going to get him down? You know what I'm saying? So the skill of sense making doesn't just go to a man with a knife call. It starts getting on scene, seeing, hey, what are my immediate problems? And that's, I think, what we've really done a good job of morphing into that class, some of that sense making, and then also clarity. Like, hey, let's not get overwhelmed by all this. Just what do I need to address first? Let's start getting some simple things done.
Well, I got to brag a little bit and flex because great minds think alike, and I can tell you that James and I, right, shout out to my partner, James Sakini, we do often ask in our officer-involved shooting class, do we treat every radio call as an OIS? Or should we?
Yeah.
What do you think? And we leave it up to them. And so I agree. I think any type of call, maybe we should be starting thinking about a critical incident. So I can tell you that ever since I got on board, and God bless for Scott even deciding to do an internal affairs by which you ranked
good lunch
it,
at the
you ranked it
barbecue
20. Scott must have ranked it 22, probably 22. He probably low ranked it as well. And here we are. a year and a half, 2 years later, and it's working out. People are students, sergeants, the next generation's interested to know what this beast, right, the belly and the beast, if you will, is really all about. So,
well, I appreciate. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah,
I appreciate what you're doing, because one of the things I do, and I'm making a generalized statement, and I hope nobody reads too much, but I do think collectively as a whole in law enforcement, we're not that great at articulating the why of what we do. And here I can prove. We did some training. I won't say the agency, sheriff's department in another state, but we did some force on force training, not part of Savage, but I had the honor of working with another guy for this brief time. But we did force on force training, and we would just give the officers a couple lines, send them into a call, and then afterwards we could stump every one of them by asking them a simple question. You got on scene. This is what you heard. You decided to go in. Why? Yeah. And the look would be like, well, officer safety. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? What does officer safety mean? Like what, why? And so I think what you're doing, what I'm doing is we're trying to build a better understanding about some processes. Yes. The tactical world's a process. Yours is a process. And then hopefully people are, with that better understanding, be able to better articulate why they aren't doing things. Yeah. And I'm telling all the young cops, you want to have some freedom from your administrator, speaking as an ex-administrator, make smart decisions out in the street, but also be able to articulate those decisions clearly, because you start building in more trust. Yeah. I learned that over my career. Once I could articulate to my bosses, they left me alone out in the field. Hot call would come out. I'd be running it. Cell phone, beeper, remember pagers?
That's right.
It wouldn't be blowing up as quick, because they knew, like, okay, I'm going to give him a little breathing space, because tends to make good decisions out in the field, and he can always explain why he does. And I had to learn that skill. But I think, man, as a young cop, man, learn that skill to a T. And
we're in the world of wanting to buy the staccato or go to Baker to Vegas instead of going to getting some good training. What do you think? Let me ask you this. You think the world of training, law enforcement training, if you look at it from 30,000 feet above, are we going to get better, or what do you think is missing, just in general?
I'm hopeful. I mean, I do think that there's a lot of good training out there. I think there's people with their hearts in the right place. Here's one of the biggest problems that I don't see changing. Well, no, let me back that up. I hope to see change. Even, I'm not going to pick on Post, probably get in trouble, but Post is doing a great job. But I even understand, like, when you turn in like an instructor guide or a thing, the intention, it has to be so detailed that I could hand it to you, Marlon, and you could teach my tactics class. Now, you probably could with your skill sets as a teacher, but and not saying it's not your forte, but that's not like what you're, develop all your spark. But a lot of other people, they'll be like, well, here's the outline, here's the presentation, go teach it. And I think we have to do a better job in law enforcement of clearly identifying the end goal in mind. What do you want your students to take out? Or are we just going through the motions? Did I create a great slide deck and then I've used a bunch of humor and I made it entertaining? Or do I as an instructor have complete clarity of what I want my student to have? And then if I do, is everything I'm doing over the 1 day, 4 hours, 8 hours, 16 hours, whatever it is it reinforcing those concepts? And I can't say from having all the law enforcement training I've been to as a student, I haven't seen that. I've seen some guys that were great orators, great comedics, and at the end of that was fun. I don't know what I took away from it or how I could even use any of that. Yeah. And I think law enforcement, we got to work on that a little bit. No,
I'm with you, man. Well, look, we're getting ready to wrap it up. Any advice that you have for anyone who wants to come on to become a cop?
To start out, I would say truly know the job. I'm laughing because I used to have to do the chief's interviews, the final interview. And God, listen, if you want to join this job to help children and help people, that's honorable. And yes, and you do get that chance. But You know, you also have to deal with the half naked person that's covered in their own feces. That I can promise you will have to deal with. And so there's all these other, again, have the lofty goals, but the day to day, it's kind of a grind. So have an understanding of what you're getting into. You're going to go to chaos. And when you show up, most people won't be happy you're there, other than they'll be like, oh, the cops are here. They're going to stop this. And it's going to be your responsibility. So have a deep understanding, have those desires to help people. Yes, obviously we all want to help people, but realize that it comes with a lot of other day-to-day stuff that isn't. You see the underbelly of society. So just have that understanding. Two other pieces of advice: maintain a good work-life balance. Have friends outside the job. Do not let your identity be consumed by the job, because when you leave, as a guy that's left, like you leave and the machine doesn't come to a halt. You are replaced the very day, or you know what I'm saying? And the only time they talk about is if you did something really funny or really stupid. That's, hopefully you leave a better legacy. But so keep it in perspective. And my advice to every cop out there is, this sounds so silly, Marlon, I hate to say it, but man, it got me through my last 2 years of my career. Find things to be grateful for when it gets tough, because there are times things don't go well. You are on the hot seat. And sometimes you have to, honestly, my last 2 years, we got some outside leadership. I wasn't happy with the direction of my department. I saw things that I loved about my department get wiped away with the stroke of a pen. Very hard to deal with. And some days, this is no joke, my thing I was grateful for is our traffic in Santa Cruz is so bad that I'd ride my bicycle. But some days I would ride home and I'd ride along the cliffs and I'd just be like, you know what? I live in a beautiful area where I get to go check the surf on the way home. And I'm going to claim that, and I'm going to find, did it get rid of my day-to-day problems? Nope. No. But it made it a little better. So gotta focus on something positive, or otherwise in the bad times, it can consume you. Brother.
Thank you so much.
Oh, complete pleasure.
Really enjoyed it. Hey, we're going to wrap it up. Okay, like always, please be safe out there, and don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.